One cold October afternoon in Boston, I got a group text from my own family. Just one short line popped up on the screen. "We think it's best if you step back for a while." I stared at my phone. For words. No explanation. No real conversation. The sender was my dad, Richard Mitchell, CEO of the family empire. A moment later, one by one, the others in the group started tapping like, or agree, as if they were reacting to some random post online. Aunt Patricia even added a thumbs-up emoji. I sat there in my Back Bay brownstone, the warm glow from my desk lamp falling across the screen, and I felt my chest sink. The wind from the Charles slipped through the cracks of the old window, sharp and cold, reminding me winter was on its way. I knew this wasn't temporary. The message was clear. You don't belong at this table anymore. I typed back one simple line. Got it. I'll withdraw from the family fund too. That was it. No exclamation points. No accusations. I set the phone down on the oak table, my hand still trembling a little. Outside, the last red maple leaves of the season spun down onto the brick sidewalks. Boston always carries this quiet, heavy beauty when fall fades away, and that night, I felt the chills settle not just outside, but deep in my chest. What the Mitchell family didn't know was that I held over 35% of that fund, the part no one expected could vanish with just one tap. And what they didn't know was that I'd been preparing for this day for years. In that moment, I knew the real storm was only just beginning. My name's Clara Mitchell. I'm 32, born and raised right here in Boston. If you've ever walked down the oak-lined streets of Brookline or Back Bay, you'd understand why this place is called the wealthy, historic heart of New England. I grew up in a 5-bedroom colonial, white walls, dark blue shutters, and a front yard lined with perfectly trimmed rose bushes. That house wasn't just a home. It was a silent declaration of my family's power. My dad, Richard Mitchell, is the second generation behind Mitchell Financial. My grandfather started it after World War II with just a few $1,000s, riding the wave of post-war growth to build an investment advisory firm. By the time my dad took over, the company had become a heavyweight in New England finance. At countless Boston cocktail parties, all it took was hearing the name Mitchell, and people would nod with respect. My mom, Linda, was the picture-perfect corporate wife. She hosted lavish dinners where handshakes and glasses of red wine sealed million-dollar deals. Her apple pie was legendary. I watched more than once as that pie alone made clients feel like they'd been welcomed into the family, and suddenly they were ready to sign a deal. Inside that house, I was the odd one out. While my cousins played soccer or built Lego castles, I was hooked on reading the stock market reports my dad left on his desk. At 10, I asked him, "Why does the yield curve invert before a recession?" He frowned, irritated, because even he didn't have an answer ready. But instead of being praised, my curiosity made me the thorn in everyone's side. I was reminded again and again, the men in this family are the ones who make decisions. My dad believed business was about gut instinct and relationships. I believed numbers told the truth. When it was my turn, I went to Wharton, one of the top business schools in the country. I graduated with honors, double majoring in finance and economics. But when I came back to the family firm at 24, my dad put me under the watch of my cousin Ethan, who had barely scraped through a state college. Dad's voice was firm when he told me, "You need to learn how things really work. Ethan's got 7 months more experience than you. Let him guide you." I'll never forget Ethan's look that day, half smug, half pity. He knew he wasn't better than me, but he also knew what mattered most in our family, being a Mitchell man. And I knew one cold fact too. No matter how good I was, I'd always be seen as the daughter who needed to be trained. That dismissal didn't stop inside the family. It spread into the boardroom, shaping how clients were steered toward who they should really see as the face of the company. In my early years at Mitchell Financial, I quickly learned a bitter truth. In this company, talent always came second to bloodline and gender. I could deliver the sharpest analysis, but all Ethan had to do was stroll into the boardroom with a confident grin and a Starbucks cup, and suddenly the whole room leaned his way. For quarterly meetings, I'd spend weeks preparing charts, risk forecasts, strategy models. But the moment I started presenting, someone, usually Uncle Harold or Aunt Patricia, would cut me off. "Clara, this sounds a little complicated. Our clients don't need all those technical terms. Richard, what do you think?" And just like that, I turned to my dad. He'd tap his pen against the table, that old habit he had when he was running out of patience. "Just focus on supporting Ethan. Real-world experience matters more than theory." His words felt like a sentence being handed down. I'd sit back down, while Ethan smirked and repeated my points in watered-down, half-baked form. And somehow, the room applauded. Patricia, who'd never worked a single day in her life, had a talent for stealing credit. I remember when I pitched expanding into the European market with a detailed 30-page plan. 3 weeks later, in another meeting, Patricia casually announced, "I think we should look at international markets, especially Europe." Everyone nodded. My dad smiled and said, "Great idea, sis." I sat there silent, watching my work turn into someone else's spotlight. My mom's way was different. After each meeting, she'd pull me aside in the hallway, squeeze my hand, and whisper gently, "Sweetheart, men don't like women who are too smart. You need to let your father and uncles feel important. If you keep pushing so hard, you'll only upset them." I never knew whether to feel sad or furious. Part of me still craved recognition from my parents, but another part ached, realizing even my own mom believed her daughter's intelligence should be hidden away to make room for so-called male authority. Family gatherings weren't any better. While my cousins were praised for buying vacation homes or closing deals with long-time clients, I sat there listening to my dad retell Ethan's strategies, the very work I had done. Then he'd raise his wine glass and toast to the Mitchell men for carrying on the legacy. No one said my name. I remember one Thanksgiving in particular. The table was filled with roast turkey, mashed potatoes, and cranberry sauce. After dinner, Uncle Harold stood, lifted his glass, and praised how everyone had shared in the work and the rewards. But I knew the truth: my department alone had brought in more than 60% of that quarter's profits. I forced a smile, raised my glass, but all I tasted was bitterness. That night, as snow dusted the backyard, I sat alone in my study, staring at glowing financial charts on my laptop screen. I told myself, one day, they'll have to see my real worth. But deep down, I also knew this family treated patience as nothing more than burying your own voice. I still remember one winter afternoon when I was 10. Boston was frozen over, oak branches in the front yard covered in white ice, while inside the house the fireplace burned bright with the warm smell of pine wood. My dad had just brought home a copy of the Wall Street Journal, dropped it on the coffee table, and rushed off to take a call. I picked it up, my eyes glued to the numbers and charts. While other kids my age cared about cartoons or video games, I was fascinated by the rise and fall of the Dow Jones line. Sitting on the sofa, I read out loud to myself, trying to make sense of it. When Dad came back, I looked up and asked, "Dad, why does the yield curve invert before recession?" The question slipped out so naturally. He froze for a second, then frowned. Before he could answer, Aunt Patricia and a couple of my cousins burst out laughing. "Listen to her," Ethan mocked. "She thinks she's some Harvard professor." The room filled with laughter. My cheeks burned, but I didn't cry. Dad just shook his head and said, half joking, half serious, "Clara, you're only 10. Leave this stuff to me and your uncles." In that moment, the line was drawn. No matter how smart or curious I was, to them I was still just the little girl who should stay quiet. After that day, I started learning how to hide my sharpness. At school, I could shine in advanced math classes. But at home, I stayed quiet, smiled, tried to make myself more pleasant so I wouldn't be branded the odd one out. Still, deep down, that memory carved a crack inside me. It followed me through childhood and into adulthood, a constant reminder that the Mitchell family never really wanted to hear my voice. And that same memory planted a quiet resolve in me. One day, I'd prove them wrong. If there's one thing I learned growing up in the Mitchell family, it's this: To survive, I had to stay quiet and stay prepared. And for years, I prepared in silence for this very moment. Back when I was still a student at Wharton, I opened a small investment account using my summer savings and part-time wages. I didn't blow money on Florida vacations like my friends. I didn't splurge on designer bags. Instead, I bought shares in scrappy little tech startups nobody cared about at the time. Some of those names later turned into billion-dollar unicorns. While my cousins bragged about their new BMWs or beach condos, I sat in my cramped dorm room, studying pitch decks from a young team of founders out in California. I remember one summer night, my only light was a desk lamp, rain tapping against the Philadelphia windows. I signed my first investment deal ever, my heart pounding like it was about to burst out of my chest. In that moment, I knew I'd started my own path. Over the years, my personal portfolio kept growing. I called it Mitchell Capital Partners, but nobody in my family had a clue. To keep it hidden, I set up an LLC, hired my own lawyer, and made sure every document was completely separate from my dad's firm. When I was younger, I dreamed of having a place of my own, a home with no Mitchell strings attached. After 8 years of grinding, I bought an old brownstone in Back Bay, Boston. 4 stories, curved wooden staircase, tall windows overlooking the maples along Commonwealth Avenue. The deed wasn't even in my name. I kept it under an LLC. That house became my fortress, with a private office full of high-end computers and custom software. On weekends, while the family relaxed at the lake house in New Hampshire, I stayed in Boston, working with a small team. Just 3 people handpicked, fiercely loyal, and brilliantly capable. Each one signed a strict NDA. They knew we were building something different, something bigger, but none of them dared to leak a word. I also spent countless nights developing trading algorithms. With the wind howling outside and the soft glow of my desk lamp, I wrote line after line of code, tested every variable. The result? 7 patents under my name, tools for data analysis and yield forecasting my father's company couldn't even imagine. I never flaunted it. I still drove my old Toyota Camry. Lunch was a turkey sandwich from the deli near the office. And in meetings, I sat quietly, looking like nothing more than a dutiful employee. But behind that quiet mask, my private portfolio had already crossed $17 million. Every night, I told myself, be patient. One day, all this preparation will save me. And that day came faster than I thought. Those investments, that brownstone, my loyal team, and those patents, they became the leverage. The leverage no one in my family even knew existed. And the very thing that would make them finally see me in a whole new light. That morning, the Boston sky was wrapped in thick gray clouds. Wind from the bay whipped hard against the maples outside the office windows, their branches shaking like angry hands. I walked into the big conference room on the 13th floor of Mitchell Financial, holding the thick stack of papers I'd stayed up nights preparing. It was our quarterly meeting, the full extended family gathered. A long walnut table, leather chairs, old oil paintings on the walls, everything felt heavy and formal. My dad sat at the head with his usual silver pen, Uncle Harold and Aunt Patricia beside him, and of course, Ethan. I started handing out my presentation, a new strategy to boost returns for our high net worth clients up to 12%, the kind of number that could make real waves in the industry. But before I could even open my mouth, the door swung open. Ethan strolled in 15 minutes late, Starbucks cup in hand, shirt unbuttoned at the collar, hair a mess like he'd just jogged out of the gym. He dropped into his seat with a confident smile. "Sorry, I was on a call with the Donovan account." My stomach dropped. Donovan was my client, the one I'd spent 6 months building a relationship with, analyzing their portfolio, finding new angles. My dad's face lit up immediately. He nodded.
"Good work, Ethan.
Clients always come first. Tell us the updates before Clara starts with her numbers." And just like that, the first 20 minutes of the meeting became Ethan's show. He breezed through his strategy, the one I'd actually built, delivered in half-baked sound bites. And somehow, everyone nodded along as if he'd just reinvented the wheel. When my turn finally came, I barely made it to the second slide before Uncle Harold cleared his throat. Clara, this all sounds a bit complicated. Our clients like things simple and trustworthy. Don't make it academic. Patricia jumped in right after.
Exactly.
These algorithms just confuse people. We're Mitchell, a brand built on stability. I drew in a long breath, trying to stay calm. My voice was slow, but steady. Recent surveys show our clients want more sophisticated strategies, not just stability. If we don't adapt, other firms will take them. My dad tapped his pen, a warning sign. He was losing patience. Clara, theory sounds nice, but we do business with relationships and instinct, not charts. I pushed back. I applied this to the Westfield portfolio, and in just 1 quarter, they hit a 14% return. The room went quiet for a moment, but instead of praise, my dad's brow furrowed. You changed the strategy without asking? I told you last month, I said. You told me to do what I thought was best for that account. He shook his head. I never agreed to a full overhaul. Ethan slid in immediately. I've got a simpler approach. A few small tweaks are enough. We don't need complicated algorithms. No slides, no data, just words. And yet the room leaned his way. My dad looked at Ethan with pride. That's the straightforward thinking clients expect. I sat there, gripping my hands under the table until my knuckles turned white. Every word felt like a blade slicing into my pride. That afternoon, I tried to speak to my dad privately. I warned him Ethan's plan had holes, that it could put clients at risk. But he didn't listen. He stared at his phone, checking baseball scores, and said, "You always think your degrees make you smarter than the family, but you still don't get what's real." I walked out of his office, heart heavy. And just then, I caught Patricia's voice in the break room. Clara's presentations just give me a headache. They always make us feel stupid. Richard needs to rein her in. I froze, like the air had turned to ice around me. For the first time in my life, I stopped believing patience would bring me fairness. I understood crystal clear. In this family, I would never be respected no matter how much profit I brought in. 3 days after that meeting, on a chilly Friday afternoon in Boston, I sat in my private office, watching the last light of the day glint off the glass towers across the street. My phone buzzed. A new notification from the family WhatsApp group lit up the screen. It was from my dad. The words were short, cold. After discussing with senior members, we think it's best for Clara to step back from managing clients. Your work behind the scenes is still important, but clients seem to respond better to the traditional approach. I read it once, then twice. Each word cut like a blade. Right after, Uncle Harold chimed in. Completely agree. Right decision. Aunt Patricia quickly sent a thumbs-up emoji and typed, "We need to stay unified." Ethan couldn't hide his glee. "I'm ready to take over the clients during the transition." Seconds later, my mom added her piece. "We only want what's best for everyone." The screen filled with nods of agreement. Not one person stood up for me. No questions. No hesitation. In just a few minutes, they'd wiped out 8 years of my work. I sat frozen. Outside, wind from the Charles whistled through the old window frame. The last maple leaves of the season spun down onto the wet sidewalk. My heart felt ice cold, but my mind suddenly went razor sharp. I let them keep texting for a bit. Then, exactly 17 minutes later, I typed one single line.
Got it.
I'll respect that decision. I'm also withdrawing from the family fund. As I hit send, I knew I'd just sparked a storm. But I wasn't scared. I'd been waiting for this day for a long time. Right away, I opened my laptop and logged into the bank portal. As one of the official fund administrators, I had full access. With just a few clicks, I triggered the withdrawal of my entire share for $1,200,000 plus the $1.7 million in gains I generated. The system popped up a message. "Are you sure you want to continue?" I smiled. "I'm sure." Then I sent a formal email to the family lawyer, citing the clause in the fund agreement that lets a major investor pull out at will. I copied it to another personal account to keep a record. Every step was legal, clean, airtight. When the screen finally read, "Transaction processed," I leaned back in my chair. What I felt wasn't just satisfaction. It was a deep, quiet sadness.
Because this was my family.
But they'd pushed me into being an outsider. I set my phone face down on the desk, switched it to silent. I knew within hours, once the bank flagged a multi-million-dollar withdrawal, my phone would light up nonstop. That night, as Boston lit up, the tall buildings glowing like a strip of stars, I sat by the window of my brownstone, hands wrapped around a cup of hot tea. The autumn sky was cold, but inside me a fire burned. After years of being dismissed, I'd finally taken control. And this time, they couldn't pretend I didn't exist. Just a few hours after I hit the button to pull my funds, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. First came the nonstop calls from my dad. Then a flood of texts from Uncle Harold, Aunt Patricia, and of course, Ethan. At the start, the tone was sharp. One message from my dad read, "Clara, what have you done? This is reckless. You don't understand the consequences." Uncle Harold fired off right after, "This is sabotage. Are you trying to drag the whole family down?" But when I stayed silent, the tone shifted. By midnight, my dad's calls came with a voice cracking under strain. "Sweetheart, the bank just froze the entire fund. The Henderson deal will collapse if we don't have the money by Monday. You need to call me back right now." I kept the phone face down on the table. Quiet. Meanwhile, my mom left a voicemail, her voice breaking. "Clara, please don't do this. Your grandfather would be heartbroken to see the legacy destroyed. This family needs unity, not division." I listened to every word, but my heart wasn't soft anymore. I made another cup of tea and sat by the window, staring out at the empty stretch of Commonwealth Avenue under the dull glow of streetlights. Late autumn Boston always carries a kind of melancholy. The wind cut through the bare trees. Rainwater shimmered on the pavement. The cold outside felt like a mirror of the chaos exploding on the other side of my phone screen. By early Saturday morning, my voicemail was full. 64 missed calls. Hundreds of unread texts. Anger mixed with panic. Ethan worried about the $20 million Henderson deal falling apart. Aunt Patricia, the same woman who had voted me out less than 24 hours ago, sent a long message. "Clara, I've always admired your intelligence. This is the time we need to stand together. Women in finance have to support each other." I smiled faintly. Too little, too late. That morning, I sat at the dining table of my brownstone, pale sunlight spilling through the glass, a hot cup of coffee in my hand. I unlocked my phone and typed one line to my dad. "I'm honoring the family's decision. We'll talk Monday in my office." Then I silenced the phone and set it aside. For the first time in years, I felt truly in control. Monday morning, Boston was freezing. The sky hung low with heavy clouds, drifting slow like they were warning of an incoming storm. I got up early, pulled on my navy blue suit, the one I'd always thought of as my armor. In my brownstone, I'd turned the dining table into a makeshift conference table. At every seat, I laid out a neatly prepared folder. Fresh coffee filled the air, and on the side, a plate of pastries I'd ordered from my favorite shop in Beacon Hill, polite but practical. At 8:30, the security chime rang. On the camera, I saw my dad standing outside, flanked by Uncle Harold, Aunt Patricia, Ethan, and the family lawyer, Jonathan Hayes. They'd come half an hour early like they wanted the upper hand. But today, the balance of power had shifted. I opened the door with a calm smile.
"Come in."
They stepped inside, eyes sweeping over my home. I could see the surprise when they realized the space was elegant polished wood floors, art lining the staircase, big windows looking out over the maples. This wasn't some temporary rental. This was a house I had built into my own, and in their eyes, I caught a flicker of unease. "The meeting's this way," I said, motioning toward the table. We sat down. My dad took the seat to my right, but the head of the table, the spot he always claimed at the company, was mine. No one argued, though the air was thick with tension. I poured coffee for each of them, steady as any host. Once everyone settled, my dad spoke first. "We need to resolve this quickly. The Henderson deal is on the line. If we don't have capital, the family loses $3 million this week." I raised my hand, his old move, the the one he used to silence me so many times. Before we talk about Henderson, let's get something clear. I withdrew completely from the fund. The transaction was legal and within the terms. The bank confirmed it. So you're not here to accuse me. You're here to negotiate. Uncle Harold's face went red. Clara, this is reckless. You're holding the family hostage. I met his eyes.
No.
This is called fairness. For years, my work was ignored, my ideas stolen, and finally, I was pushed out with a group text. If you treat me like an outsider, I have every right to act as an independent investor. Jonathan, the lawyer, cut in with a calm voice. Legally, Clara is correct. The room fell silent. My dad sighed, then lowered his voice. What do you want to save, Henderson? I opened the folder in front of me, my voice steady. I'll lend $5 million, enough to cover the deal, plus a cushion. But it'll be a loan at market rates with a contract, not a family contribution. The table erupted. Patricia rushed in, syrupy sweet. Clara, no need to make this so cold. We're family. I cut her off, sharp. Family doesn't kick each other out over WhatsApp. This is business. And I'm offering a fair deal. My dad stayed quiet. I could see it in his face, he was weighing it. Henderson was a project he couldn't afford to lose. Ethan scoffed. You think you can survive without the Mitchell name? Without it, no client would even look at you. That was the moment I'd been waiting for. I picked up the small remote and flicked on the TV mounted on the wall. The first slide lit up with a logo, Mitchell Capital Partners. I've been running my own firm for 4 years, I said slowly, flipping to the next slide. Growth charts filled the screen, the green line climbing high. My clients have earned an average return of 17%, almost double what Mitchell Financial delivers. The room froze. My dad's face went pale, Harold flushed red, and Patricia lost her fake smile. I kept going, sliding a folder across to Jonathan. Here are 7 patents under my name, analytics tools, and forecasting models. All legal. Here's a list of 27 private clients with over $400 million in assets under management. And here's 17 current Mitchell Financial clients who signed clauses allowing them to follow me if I left. Ethan's face drained of color. My dad sat silent, gripping his pen tight. And for the first time, I saw it in his eyes, respect, tangled with fear. I closed my laptop and lifted my chin. I didn't call this meeting to beg. I called it to prove my worth, the worth you've all chosen to ignore. If you want me to save Henderson, we do it on my terms. No one spoke. The only sound was the ticking clock on the wall and my own heartbeat pounding steady in my chest. And in that moment, for the first time in my life, I wasn't a shadow in the Mitchell family. I was the one holding the power. After nearly 2 hours of negotiations, the family had no choice but to accept my terms. Jonathan, the lawyer, drafted the contract right there on his laptop. I signed first, then slid the papers across to my dad. He took the pen, his hand trembling slightly, his eyes clouded with fatigue and bitterness. That $5 million loan was wired over that same morning, enough to keep the Henderson deal from collapsing. The family sighed in relief, while I calmly gathered my folders. But deep inside, I knew one thing for certain. The power game would never go back to the way it used to be. As everyone got ready to leave, my dad paused, glancing around my brownstone, the paintings on the wall, the shelves packed with books, the tidy workspace I'd built for myself. His voice was rough. I've underestimated you all my life, haven't I? I didn't answer right away. I looked him straight in the eyes, then said slowly, what I need isn't a late compliment. What I need is respect from the start. He nodded, gaze drifting. And just before walking out the door, he added, still, your grandfather would be proud. He always valued results and persistence. The door closed, leaving behind a strange silence. I sat down, resting my hands on the oak table, and let out a long breath. For the first time in years, I felt lighter. Not because of the financial win, but because I had finally spoken in my own voice and been heard. In the weeks that followed, the family dynamic began to shift. At the next meeting, they proposed restructuring the company. A new division, Mitchell Capital Management, was formed and I became its CEO. This time, power didn't come from the family name. It came from performance and real value. The family fund also changed its rules. Voting power now matched capital contributions. With more than 35%, my voice could no longer be brushed aside. Of course, old habits don't vanish overnight. Sometimes Ethan still tried to steal credit in client meetings. Sometimes Patricia slipped in a line to downplay me. But unlike before, I now had position, authority, and most of all, choice. I knew that if I ever walked away, over 200 million in client assets would walk with me. And that fact alone forced everyone to think twice. In our first year, Mitchell Capital Management blew past expectations, posting the highest returns of any division. New clients came for innovation. Old clients stayed for results. Even my dad, though still stubborn at times, started to admit openly, Clara has vision our generation didn't. One late night, almost a year after everything, he and I sat together reviewing the quarterly report. Staring at the numbers, he suddenly said, "When I took over the company from your grandfather, he told me the greatest legacy isn't preserving, it's daring to change." Back then, I didn't get it. Now I think I do. I smiled softly and replied, "Evolving is harder than preserving, but it's the only way to survive." He nodded quietly, and in that moment, the distance between us felt smaller than it ever had. Looking back, I realized the biggest lesson wasn't in profit margins or in the CEO title. It was simpler than that. Your value doesn't come from someone else's approval. It comes from standing up and claiming it yourself. Sometimes you have to walk away from the table just to prove you were the one bringing the food all along. And sometimes, the strongest thing you can do is stay silent in the chaos and let the truth speak for itself.